Imelda Marcos, wife of the Filipino dictator, has just turned 97. Her name keeps resurfacing, sometimes through rumors of her death, more recently through the scandal surrounding Malaysia's former First Lady, Rosmah Mansor. And that is no coincidence. Imelda is the most extravagant First Lady in modern history, a woman still surrounded by legend. Kilograms of diamonds, handmade silk toilet paper, and 3,000 pairs of shoes, while half her country walked barefoot. The Marcos family fled the country to escape a popular uprising. That shameful escape looked like the end of this dynasty forever. But they did not merely come home. Right now, her own son is the president of the Philippines. Why did the nation forgive a family that lived like royalty among the poor? Why, after countless court cases, has she never spent a single day behind bars? And how did a bulletproof bra, her husband's glass coffin, and an entire island of African giraffes become part of this extraordinary story? Imelda's mother died young, and her father lost his fortune. The girl was sent to live with relatives, forced to sleep on overturned wooden crates in a damp garage. At night, rats scratched at the thin walls, and a cold draft cut straight through to her bones. Later, once she became First Lady, she would work carefully to erase that past. Imelda even had a book by a Filipino journalist banned. The first book to tell the truth about her childhood poverty. Because if you have always been rich, you never need to explain to the people where your millions suddenly came from. As biographers would later write, it was that dark garage that shaped her deepest fear. An obsessive terror of ever being poor again. It was as if hunger had left an emptiness inside her, one she would spend the rest of her life trying to fill with power and money. She grew up strikingly beautiful, tall, poised, with a piercing gaze. In 1954, she entered the Miss Manila beauty pageant and did not win, but she refused to accept the result. Imelda went straight to the mayor of Manila and convinced him to give her a title. The mayor created a brand new one, just for her, Muse of Manila. There, in the blinding glare of the spotlights, she caught the eye of an ambitious young politician, Ferdinand Marcos. The official propaganda would later call it a fairy tale love at first sight. After all, they married just 11 days after meeting. But many historians agree on one thing. This was a perfect political alliance. Ferdinand needed a dazzling wife to win the presidency, and Imelda needed an ironclad guarantee that she would never go back to that garage. In 1965, Ferdinand Marcos became president of the Philippines. Over 2 decades in power, he bent the laws to his will, seized control of whole industries, from sugar to transportation, and methodically funneled international loans into his family's Swiss bank accounts. And Imelda had her own crucial role in this system. She became the dazzling shop window of the regime. Her task was to convince the world and her own people that the Philippines was flourishing. She personally handed out food in the slums, sang at rallies, and gave ordinary people the feeling of a celebration. Imelda launched an enormous building program. Modern hospitals rose across the country, and the huge cultural center of the Philippines opened its doors to the greatest ballet stars in the world. On the surface, the nation truly seemed to be blooming, and people sincerely believed they were on the road to greatness. But behind that glittering shop window lay something extraordinarily dark. While theaters were being built, the real economy was collapsing. The Philippines grew twice as slowly as its neighbors in the region, and eventually tipped into full recession. The country was drowning in debt. But Imelda did not want to see the poverty around her palaces. She ordered high walls built around the Manila slums, telling reporters plainly that she had, in her words, an allergy to ugliness. Determined to hold on to power forever, Marcos cancelled the elections and declared martial law across the country. While the First Lady philosophized about beauty at diplomatic receptions, thousands of political opponents were thrown behind bars. Students and journalists vanished from the streets without a trace, leaving families to wait for years for those who would never come home. Imelda herself lived in constant fear, after a man with a machete attacked her at a public event and left permanent scars on her arms. One item was added to her wardrobe forever: a bulletproof bra made of Kevlar. And her grand construction projects were beginning to take on a bloody undertone. In the early 1980s, Imelda dreamed of raising a colossal Manila film center, one that would overshadow Cannes. Workers poured concrete around the clock. Then one night, the enormous scaffolding collapsed, and dozens of people plunged to the ground below. Official accounts still argue over the details, but the tragedy at that construction site became the darkest legend of the era. It was said that in order to keep the schedule, the rescue operation was quickly shut down, and the workers still trapped in the wet concrete were simply buried inside it. This chilling story took hold in the public imagination for one reason. It struck the rawest nerve of the age. A beautiful facade always came at too high a price. And you might think this was the peak of the madness? The worst was still ahead. By this point, absolute power had cut the First Lady off from reality completely. New York became her personal supermarket. At the legendary Studio 54 nightclub, she danced with Hollywood stars. Black limousines pulled up outside Cartier, where in a single day she could spend several $1 million. Originals by Michelangelo and Picasso were shipped straight to her residences. As local journalists would later write, selling just one of her favorite tiaras could have paid for the university education of 4,000 Filipino teenagers. But the state treasury kept picking up the tab for this banquet. The scale was becoming truly royal. When the youngest Marcos daughter got married, an entire hotel and a brand new runway were built especially for the ceremony. The carriages were ordered from Austria, and the purebred horses to pull them were flown in directly from Morocco. It seemed they had bought up the entire world. And here, a question arises. What more can a woman want when she already has everything? Imelda found her answer. And it would cost ordinary people their homes. Under a project widely linked to the First Lady, hundreds of local families were forcibly evicted from the Philippine island of Calawi. Their homes were bulldozed, and the emptied island was stocked with giraffes, zebras, and antelope shipped in from Kenya, a personal safari park. The animals wandered through the tropics like a living monument to absolute impunity. But every illusion eventually comes to an end. The dictator's main political rival returned from exile and was shot dead at the foot of the airplane stairs on the tarmac in Manila. That assassination was the spark. Millions of Filipinos poured into the streets of the capital. When the dictator sent armored vehicles to break up the crowds, something extraordinary happened. Nuns holding Catholic rosaries and ordinary citizens stepped into the path of the tanks. The soldiers refused to fire on their own people. The Marcos family realized it was the end. An American helicopter carried them into exile. They settled in Hawaii. It was there that American customs officers were left speechless as they went through the family's luggage. Dozens of wooden trunks, suitcases stuffed with millions of dollars in cash, and hundreds of pieces of fine jewelry. In one of the crates lay 24 heavy gold bars. Each one was engraved with the same inscription: "To my husband, on our 24th wedding anniversary." But what the First Lady left behind inside the palace shocked the world just as much. When the enraged crowd stormed into her private quarters, among hundreds of luxurious evening gowns, they found thousands of pairs of designer shoes. Legends sprang up around this luxury almost overnight, that the First Lady used silk toilet paper and that she could have a government plane turned around over the ocean simply because she had forgotten to pick up her favorite cheese in Rome. 3 years later, Ferdinand Marcos suffered kidney failure, and the former dictator died far from his homeland. But if you think exile turned out to be a punishment, the truth is the opposite. It was in exile that her second life truly began. A year after her husband's death, Imelda stood trial in New York. American prosecutors accused her of fraud and of laundering stolen Filipino money through the purchase of real estate in the United States. In the courtroom, she played the role of a frail, broken widow to perfection. She wore black, wept, clutched her rosary, and even fainted on cue. This performance worked brilliantly. The jury acquitted her. Soon, the Philippine government allowed Imelda to return to the country so she could stand trial on her own soil. And back she came. But instead of hiding away, she went straight into politics and, before long, took a seat in Parliament as a congresswoman. Meanwhile, a new surreal spectacle began. The authorities agreed to let her husband's body be brought home, but only on the condition that he be buried in his native province. And yet, the burial never actually took place. Instead, the dictator's body was placed inside a refrigerated glass coffin, where it lay for 23 years. Imelda would regularly kiss the glass in front of the cameras, while loyal supporters of the family made pilgrimages to see him. It was only in 2016 that a new Filipino president finally allowed the former dictator to be buried at the Cemetery of National Heroes in the capital. To avoid mass protests and public outrage, the ceremony was held in secret. But the absurdity did not end there. Inside that glass coffin in the province, a wax replica was left behind. An eerie forgery, and people simply kept coming to pay their respects. In 2018, a Philippine court did at last find Imelda guilty on 7 counts of corruption. Despite facing the prospect of spending the rest of her life behind bars, she managed to avoid prison altogether. Imelda posted bail, filed an appeal, cited her advanced age, and simply went home. This strategy of dragging out the courts turned out to be remarkably effective. And today we see the very same pattern with Malaysia's former First Lady Rosmah Mansor. Sentenced to 10 years and hit with an enormous fine, she too is filing appeals and remaining free. And it looks very much as though she studied the Filipino playbook with great care. For the Marcos family, this tactic worked flawlessly. Alongside the court cases, they poured enormous sums of money into social media. Thousands of beautifully edited clips went viral on TikTok and YouTube. A new generation, one too young to remember the dictatorship firsthand, was offered a different version of the past. One with no victims and no debts, only beautiful bridges, safety on the streets, and great prosperity. The campaign worked. In 2022, the people of the Philippines, through an entirely democratic vote and with genuine hope and enthusiasm, elected her son, Ferdinand Marcos Jr., as their new president. Today, he rules the country, the people love him sincerely, and for millions of citizens, the darker pages of the past have simply faded into the background. Today, Imelda Marcos is 97 years old. She has outlived almost every witness to her boundless luxury and to the tragedies of others. She is now the unofficial Queen Mother, not a prisoner in a jail cell. Her shoes have become a museum exhibit, the giraffes still roam that island, and her family once again rules the country. So what do you think? Who is she really? A calculating thief, or truly a heroine of the nation? Write your opinion in the comments. Subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and see you next time.